Just back on, like, if we go back to the transgender woman in sport and things like that, I had a conversation with a friend the other day, and I'm just wondering, are we cherry picking here? Like, are we plucking out these examples like Leah Thomas and I think obviously there's more, and then just using it to amplify this issue and make it bigger than it is?
There's always that fear, especially with something like TikTok, of cherry picking. And I would say some of the more insane stuff is probably cherry picked. But I don't know how close, just in American politics context, the Democratic Party, including President Biden and almost every Democratic member of Congress, supports legislation known as the Equality Act, which is ostensibly LGBT rights legislation, but goes very far. That act would redefine the term sex under federal law to include self-ID. So, are we cherry picking when we show crazy leftists who pretend biological reality doesn't exist? In a sense, maybe. But in another sense, these ideas really have risen to the top of our politics and our media and our law and our debates. And so, yes, is there some cherry picking going on with the, outrageous, bearded women who are saying my pronouns are she, her, and I identify as an 8-year-old girl? Yes, of course, there's some cherry picking to that. But we'd be kidding ourselves if we pretended these ideas were just, being espoused in some radical college classrooms or something. No, they really have, to varying degrees, infiltrated the highest levels of elite discourse and politics in America, at least.
Again, I don't understand how. Maybe if you can go more into self-identification. So that means someone can just say they are whatever they say they are, which on its face sort of sounds ridiculous, but then you're saying it's in legislation now?
Well, that legislation hasn't been passed, but it's in proposed legislation that about half the political class supports. So it's very mainstream. But yeah, it would redefine the term sex to essentially mean gender identity as synonyms. And when I don't know about you, but when I was first introduced to the social justice concept of trans, what they said to us was gender and sex are two different things. Sex is your biology, your chromosomes, your hormones. You can't change your sex, but some people have a gender identity that's different, how they want to socially present themselves. They've essentially done away with even that distinction. They're just yeah, you are whatever sex you say you are, right? That's the logic that's embedded in, for example, saying trans women should be allowed to compete in women's sports. Well, if we were acknowledging biological reality, we might say it's perfectly fine for a trans woman, at least I would say this, to dress however they want, to call themselves whatever they want, to go by whatever pronouns they want. And if people want to use them, they can. But what they can't do is change their DNA and become males. They are still, or become females. They're still biological males. Their sex cannot be changed. And so I think that's the disconnect, is that they've shifted the goalposts so far at this point that they're essentially arguing that I've literally seen academics and political commentators argue that sex is a social construct. And this is just obviously untrue. It's people have taken basic biology and then they'll make logical leaps. They'll start talking about intersex. Well, that proves it's not a binary. Well, okay, but none of the people we're talking about are intersex. And it's 0.2% of society. So it doesn't really actually change the fact that almost everyone is XX or XY. And it's almost always possible to tell who is who and who isn't. And so they try to add this fake nuance, but in reality, they're just erasing the distinctions that made any of their ideas palatable in the first place. And we might get to this, but they're also undercutting some of the gay arguments that were successful in the first place. If sex isn't real, if sex is a spectrum, a construct, a social construct, well, then there's really not much of a legitimacy for same-sex attraction, right? It was always I'm born this way. I can't help it. I'm a biological man. I'm only can love another biological man. Well, if gender is just whatever you say it is, conversion therapy should work, right? Why don't you just identify as a different gender and be straight? Why don't you just adjust what you're attracted to and be identified and like somebody who's the opposite sex because their gender identity matches what you're interested in. Like the whole house of cards quickly falls apart when they keep pushing to the extremes, and they don't seem to realize or care that they're undercutting all the progress that was made.